Hey everyone, this is Jim Moore, Words of Encouragement. This is part 4 in the series of called What Happened to You? My story. And we're now talking about the establishment of the Salem House of Prayer and how that started, and putting this on a voice and video record so that others can see it in the future. So I'm kind of going detailed here and taking my time on some of these, skipping a lot of stuff. but kind of going deep a little bit here on the house of prayer intentionally, and feel the anointing of the Lord to do that. So I'm going to pick up where we left off. We were talking about how that went through the dark night of the soul, and God reestablishing intimacy with Him in my life and heart, giving the commandment to start the Salem House of Prayer, needing quite a bit of confirmation that was going to happen. Finally made the decision, started the thing, had some tremendous miracles and visions that brought it to pass, undeniably the Lord, and then within about a month or two, lost the building we were in and had to move into my our garage, Linda, my garage, and everybody stopped coming except for Jan and Steve Weeks, and they really helped keep us going. If it were not for them, we probably wouldn't have kept going. So kudos to them. And then moving around to a number of different places, punching wells all the way around the city, and then eventually winding up in back all the way out the south end of town where we started. So we started the south end, kind of moved all around, and we're downtown for a while, other places, and then back to Kubler on the grounds there at CCPC with Ray and Kathy Falgo, and now we'll go from there. Okay, so we're going to pick up from there. Teresa, thanks for coming back. God bless your heart. All right, so, and again, please, anybody share these with others. Again, there's 4 of them. I think this will be the last one. I don't know. I'm going to stop saying I know for sure. All right, so we are now in South Salem, again, on Kubler Road, and suddenly we get a phone call. Ray and Kathy, hey guys, bad news. We're going to have to stop. Now, I want to paint a quick picture of the space that we were in. So we're in a modular building, just like Kansas City IHOP. So if you missed that part of the story, when I first drove up to the International House of Prayer, it was this little tiny building. I thought I'd been deceived, but the glory of God was there in a way I'd never felt it. Little tiny trailer. That's what we were in now, interestingly enough. So got the call, and they said, we've got a problem. We have to not sell, but take the building off the land. And the reason why is the city of Salem contacted them and said, hey guys, we know you didn't know this, but you are literally, now think about this prophetically, you put that modular building on top of the 2 main or city water mains. So there are 2, and I think they said 32 or 36-inch water mains that fed the city of Salem. The water source, are you listening to me? You can't make this stuff up, Wendy. The water source for the city of Salem was directly 10, 20 feet below the prayer room, the house of prayer. And we're like, half of us are laughing hysterically, and the other half, of us, I don't mean people, I just mean in our hearts, are weeping. We have to move again. Oh my gosh. But it was amazing to me. Only God could have done that. Of all the space, they had a large compound. Of all the place we put it. Anyway. So once again, and this little place we had was a room. A room, it had a large area that we had the prayer room where we put the chairs and the musical instruments. And man, we had some dynamic prayer meetings. I'm telling you what, we had our first internship there. We had different people from IHOP come. And, people like Eddie Bellasso and Kirk Bennett and some other guys whose names I can't all remember. But anyway, and one of the first conferences we did was in the Japanese foreign exchange student building in Salem. Anyway, so many stories. But we didn't even have a bathroom. We had 2 little office spaces that we did work in, and we would come for like 8 hours a day and do our stuff. We didn't even have a bathroom. The bathroom was an outhouse. that Ray and Kathy put right outside the building. So we would pray and go outside into the outhouse, into the portable, call it what you want. And our kitchen was a folding chair with a microwave on top of it. I kid you not. Okay? Can I say it again? You got to be willing to do the small stuff. You got to be willing to clean the toilets. You got to be willing to be the janitor. You got to be willing to go door to. You got to be willing to do the hard stuff if God's going to bless you with the bigger stuff. Okay? He says, if you cannot do that which is least, you will not do that which is great. That is a godly biblical principle. Anyway, hi, Kathy. Thanks for coming back. So I want to tell you about the financial provision before I tell you about how we actually moved, because I just remembered this happened right before we moved. So most of you probably know, I'm not going to go there. So one day we're in the building. Now, I had started writing my book on the Song of Songs without knowing I was writing a book. I was in a prayer room, and I'd heard something from Mike Bickle on the Song of Songs, kind of lit a fire in me. The Lord speaks to me and says, hey, Jim, I want you to write, take notes. Read the Song of Songs and take some notes on it, because I started taking notes by hand. This was pre-laptop, okay? And so I started doing that, and about 100 pages in, God, Jehovah Sneaky, again, speaks to me, and he says, Jim, look at what you have in front of you. And I had about 100 pages of notes, and I'm like, wow. And initially, the reason we wrote these was not to write a book, but to give to our worship guys so that they could have a little bit of exposition on the Song of Songs so they could sing it better. Okay? It's kind of a thing. We'd sing line by line through different books of the Bible. Anyway, so over the course of time, I wound up getting a laptop, taking more notes. I'm trying to show you that this is sometimes how things work. So I'm writing this, what turns out to be a commentary, thick commentary on the Song of Songs, because I am writing it line by line, verse by verse, sometimes word by word, just giving the explanation of it as the Holy Spirit reveals it to me. Because I'd always thought of it as a marriage book. Now I'm seeing it as a prophetic testimony of the bridegroom, which is what Jesus is called, and his bride, which is what we're called. So I'm writing, get a couple 100 pages. One day, I accidentally, this was back before there were safeguards for erasing things on your internet, on your laptop, on your Word program. Literally, there was time they didn't have those. I hit the wrong button. I erased 150 pages of notes. Erased them all. They were all gone. And the Lord had spoke to me and he said, Jim, see what you have. Look at this. And he said, I want you to start writing with the idea or the vision of other people starting to read it. Well, other people were already reading it. What he was saying, without saying it, was you're going to put this into book form. So anyway, lost it all. Are you listening? Just like when we lost our building and almost gave up, I almost gave up on writing the commentary on the Song of Songs. Because I was upset about it. I was angry about it. I said, God, how could you let that happen? Even though I was the one that did it. How could you let that happen? You know how many hours that represented? That's probably 100 hours worth of work, and it's gone. And I said, I'm not going to, there's no way. Anybody out there, I know you don't normally hear stuff like this, but it's just the truth. So I'm not going to do that again. Forget it. But I did. I humbled myself and I started over. And I did it with the belief that God would actually make it better than it was, because that's what he does. He takes what Satan means for evil and he turns it into good. So I said, okay, I'll do this, but it's got to be better than it was for, and it was. All right. So doing that. Speaking of the laptop, I want to talk about financial provision. So in that building, one day, we are sitting and we're watching a video clip that someone had picked up on the internet. So I gathered our little handful of guys around. We never had any more than a handful. And I took the laptop and put it up on a chair and turned it on. And it was a guy from, I think, ABC News was interviewing Lou Engle, of all people. And this is back when Lou was doing I think it was called Justice House of Prayer in Washington, D.C. And it got picked up on national news. And the guy is doing this interview, and I can almost remember the guy's name, but I can't. So anyway, he's asking Lou questions, and he's asking him, how do you fund this? Because Lou was saying, no, this is my job right now. I'm doing this, 24/7. I'm here 8 hours a day. This is my job, okay? He says, so the interviewer said, how do you do this? And he said, a lady came to me, and he tells this story about a woman coming to him and paying his entire year's salary, estimating what it would cost him. I don't know if it was a minimum wage or what, but it was like $30,000, $40,000, okay? And he said, this lady came to me and paid out a year's worth of salary, and that's what I live on. And we're rejoicing that some guy is doing what we're doing, and it was great. But the money part of it is like, that'll never happen to us. You ever feel like that? You hear these testimonies, you go, oh, that never happens to me. That kind of stuff never happens to me. Well, that's what we were saying. That never happens to me. Yeah, maybe sometimes we're not in the place for it to happen. I don't know. Anyway, Linda and I talked about it. Ha, ha, ha. Wouldn't that be fun? About a week later, actually, we had a conversation. We said, I wonder, what would we do if somebody gave us that much money? Ooh, sorry about that. Said, what would we do if somebody gave us that much money? And we said, well, we'd take it, because we wanted to go. Actually, I forgot to tell this part. We actually were doing full-time right now. So we had been pastoring a church, Assembly of God Church, Dave Hoole's church, called Storehouse Ministries in Staten, Oregon. We'd been there for, I think, about a year. And we'd done one of the conferences that I talked about. This one we were doing at Life Church. Okay, and the Lord had spoke to us about quitting the church, resigning our pastorate, and doing what we were doing at the house of prayer full time. No money. Nobody's supporting, right? Nobody's supporting. Hallelujah. Hey, nice to have you. And that's when we watched this video. So we had actually made the decision to do that. Good friend of ours, I'm trying to think of his name, Gary Weens, who was on staff at International House of Prayer, was doing the conference. And at one point, he looks down at myself and Jacob Ray and Linda and said, Jim Moore, God has given you a building permit. That's how he said it. God has given you a building permit to build his house of prayer in Salem, Oregon. And of course, the glory of God, we're weeping and crying. And my elders, my deacons from the church in Staten happened to be in that meeting. And I looked over at them, and every one of them were staring at me. And my spirit, in their spirit, they knew this word meant we had to quit the church. Nobody said it. That's not what Gary Ween said. Nobody said those words, but we knew. And found out later on, oh yeah, we knew exactly what that meant. So that's what we did. We went back, we talked with them, we resigned the church, and we made a huge step of faith. Now, Linda's still working at Quisenberry, so we have a little bit of income, okay? But not enough. Not enough for me to quit. Actually, one of the reasons I took the church, because obviously we felt like the Lord said to, but also because it would bring some provision. So we decided to do that, to stop. So, trying to remember where I'm at. So, we talked about, we went for, I don't know, a few months. Linda remembers how long probably we went with no support. We told a few people, okay, we're resigning our church with our nice salary and our benefits and our health insurance. We're resigning that. You see, I know people that think that God always makes a way before you have to step out. It's not true. It's not true. I think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of people never do step out, is because they're waiting for God to make it easy. Anyway, get off that. So we're talking, wouldn't it be great if somebody gave us a bunch of money? Yeah. Went for a couple months with very little money, very hard. And then one day, Ray and Kathy come to us. And they said, hey, actually it was Ray. Ray said, hey, Jim, I want to ask you a question. Now, they didn't know that we'd watched this video or anything. They had no idea. They came to us and said, I want to ask you a question. If someone gave you a bunch of money, what would you do with it? And immediately my mind goes to the video we watched and to the conversation Lynn and I had about that. And I said, oh, it's funny you should ask that, because we were just talking about this. We would take whatever money we had and we would divide it up Oh, we put it in the bank and divided it up on paper into 12 months, and we would live off that every month so I could do this full time. And he reaches in his pocket and he pulls out a check for, I think it was either $30,000 or $40,000. Same amount that Lou Engle got. And I was dumbfounded. Absolutely dumbfounded. So God made a way. Now, here's another part of that story. Linda, I didn't tell her right away. I was going to do Jim Sneaky. Our anniversary was coming up. Linda and I had talked about this at length. And she said, if God would do something like that, if God would make a way, I would quit my job. We'd went through financial hardship, losing our car, almost losing our home, going into debt, you name it. It was very hard. The dark night of the soul, those 2 years, couldn't get a job. She was not about to just quit her job for no reason, She says, but if the Lord makes a way, I will. I'll do it. And because she wanted to be a part. It wasn't just, I was already doing this full time, okay? And no big credit to me, just trying to be obedient. Anyway, so I set it up. Our anniversary was coming. I can't remember which year it was. Sorry, honey. Anyway, had a really big thing. Rented a limousine. Got a motel in Seattle. And we used to like to walk in downtown Seattle at Pike's Market and all that. I wouldn't even go there now. But anyway, set it all up. Went to got reservations at a steakhouse, really nice steakhouse. Anyway, went there. April 3rd, our anniversary came. Took her out to the steakhouse. Had the envelope in my pocket. And we sat down and I said, I have a present for you. I have a surprise for you. And I said, do you remember when you said that if God would provide? And again, I'm only sharing stuff she shared, so I have permission. That if God would provide, that you would go full time at the house of prayer. She said, yeah. And I pulled out that, I think it was $40,000 check. Slid it across the table. And she began to cry. And she looks up and said, did I really say that? Did I really say that? Well, bless her heart, she honored that commitment. And we both came on full time. Now, here's what the Lord said to me while we're there. One day in prayer, he spoke to me and he said, Jim, and I don't remember if he said this right before we got the check or after, I don't know. All I remember is the incident. He spoke to me and he said, Jim, if you, and hear me now, because this is important for those of you who step out. He said, Jim, if you will treat this like a job, like a regular job, and you will give me 40 hours a week, and you'll be faithful just like you would if you were an employee and someone else was your employer. If you let me be your employer, I will pay you a fair wage for what you do. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And that's what I did. I came in Monday through Friday and sometimes on weekends, at least 8 hours a day. Wasn't always did it perfect, but I made that commitment to the Lord and expected him to honor his promise, and he did. Actually, the next year, we had a similar thing happen with Ray and Kathy, and where our monthly expenses were paid. So anyway, great things happening. All of a sudden, we get the phone call, you have to leave. Ray and Kathy says, we're sitting on top of the city of Salem water mains. We have to go. That's when the Lord, we went up to a place where we had gotten a lot of revelation before about the house of prayer, a Christian Renewal Center. Alan and Eunice Hansen, good friends, great testimony. Boy, you ought to read their testimony. They've both now entered the veil into the heavenly realm and live with Jesus. But we went up there, a little group of us, and we prayed and we sought the Lord. What do we do now? What do we do now? This is like our 6th or 7th or whatever, or 5th, I don't remember, building that we have been forced to leave. Are you going to give us another one and pay for it? And the Lord spoke very clearly. And he said, you are now about to enter your promised land. Just like Joshua entered over into Canaan. He says, you're going to cross over and the manna is going to dry up. Woohoo! This provision that I've been giving you free of charge year after year is going away. And you know, of course that was a hard thing to hear, but we knew it was the Lord. And he says, you are now going to have to plant and sow, just like they did. Remember, they came over and the manna dried up, and now they had to plant, seed, and harvest, and so on. So in other words, it says, now you're going to have to do some work for it, which, you know, it's fine. It's okay. You can't expect to get a free ride all the time, but God was good. So anyway, we said, all right, where do we go? And he said, downtown. We're like, downtown? He said, yep, downtown. Well, we've already been downtown. Yes, but that's where I've called you to be, and that's where you're going to stay. Okay? That's what he said. He says, this is where I've called you to be. That's where you're going to stay. So we started looking for places. I had a group of pastors that I had been meeting with for, I don't know how long. Jake had introduced me to them, and I'd been going to their meetings and sharing with them about the house of prayer, and so they were helping to bear that burden. And we finally landed, we looked at a bunch of different places downtown. They all cost a ton of money, and you know, like $1 a square foot, and you know, even a small place was a lot of money. We finally found a spot in a building that nobody wanted, right on, well, it's not exactly on the corner. It was like one segment removed from the corner of of Shemekada and Liberty Street. Liberty is the doors faced Liberty, and Shemekah was the side street. Can I just say real quickly, God knows what he's doing. Liberty, of course, we're all people of liberty, right? You shall know the truth, too shall make you free. It is for freedom that God has set free, liberty, okay? Liberty Street, people are going to be liberated and set free. Shemekada was an Indian Native American word that means gathering place. So there we are. We see this building. We go into it. It's got 3 levels. Nobody had wanted this building for a long time because of some, you know, structural zoning things. I mean, it's set for like 12 years. And, but we said, we'll take it. And we talked to the landlord, and we settled on just one of the floors, and had the pastor friends of mine come up. We prayed over it. Everybody felt really good about it. And without money, we made a commitment to the guy, we'll rent this upper floor of this. There's an elevator that went up to it. It was really great. For those of you who want to read this story, you can always purchase the book, The Prophetic History of the Salem House of Prayer. Go online and at the House of Prayer and find that. So anyway, so we decided to take the building. We got in there. We set up the prayer room. It was this huge, I mean, going from a little tiny tin can modular, you know, trailer thing to this 10,000 square foot, albeit cavernous, vacant space with bathrooms and a kitchen. It had literal bathrooms to go to the bathroom in, and a literal kitchen to make food in, and 2 office spaces, and this gigantic area for the prayer room. So we're happy as clams. We're just like, yee-haw. So we set up and we do all of our stuff, and we're starting to have these prayer meetings, and it is wonderful. The glory of the Lord was like, here's where I put you. This is me. So people are coming out. It's good. We went for, I think, about, I don't know, a few months. We thought, okay, are you listening? We thought our days of disappointment, being in a place and having it ripped out from us, were over. They were not. We were there for a few months, and suddenly we were contacted by the city. Now, I want to caveat this part of this testimony to be very clear about the fact that I'm not going to diminish, I'm not going to be sarcastic, I'm not going to speak ill of our city fathers and those who were running the city at that time or are today. We love our city, the city of Salem. We loved past tense and still do today. We loved the people that run it, even though we didn't always agree with them, and some of them were not very good people, but we loved them. We prayed for them, okay? We were there not to be in opposition. Friend, this is so important. You're not there to conquer, and to be the hero of the city. You're there to support the city. You're there to love the people. And yes, sometimes you have to stand against darkness to do that, and so on. Anyway, we got notice. You can't be in the building. We had just gotten the building. You cannot be in the building because of zoning and some other things that would come to light later on. You have to vacate the building. what do we got to do? We contacted them. We talked to their officials and so on and so on. Guys would come down. They said, well, you know, it's got to get this and this. And maybe if you put up this, they were kind of dragging us along a little bit. And I know I've got some friends of mine in the city that would say that's not true, but it is true. It is. They were not getting to the real reason why we couldn't be there. Okay. And the real reason that we couldn't be there. So they were saying, you know, you got to fix this. You'd have to do this. You'd have to do this. And we told them in faith, we will do whatever we have to do to be able to stay in this building. And drug it out. Finally, one day, I remember the day, remember talking to the guy, I could tell you his name. He comes in, he says, because we're telling them, okay, we're going to do this. We're doing this. We got plans to do this. We're going to do whatever we have to do so the zoning will allow us to be here. And he said, Jim, there's one more thing. There is an ordinance on the city books that declares that no religious organization, specifically a church, can be in the downtown commercial business, CB, commercial business zone, okay, the core, as it were, the heart of downtown Salem. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, no, literally. There's an ordinance written down that says you can't be here. And it wouldn't matter who you were, if you're the Baptist church, you know, they basically saw us as a church, and that's, you know, there was some accuracy to that. And I'm like, that is unconstitutional. You can't prevent us from going somewhere in the city if we meet the requirements of the business. But nobody, it had been on the books since the 50s. Salem at one time had tons of churches downtown, and it actually hindered some of the ability for merchants to make money, and therefore the city to get taxes off of the money that the merchants made. So somebody back in the 50s said, we got to stop this. We got to say no more churches in the downtown core. We didn't know that, okay? There had been a mistake. Our attorney had gone down to the city of Salem before we ever moved in and said, hey, is it okay to move? And whoever it was, some secretary or some person that he spoke with said, oh yeah, it's fine. They didn't even know. They didn't even know about the ordinance. They signed off on it. That's how we were able to get in. And at first the city thought we had did a runaround, and we said, oh, no. Our attorney talked to one of your people. Here's the person's name, and here's what they said. And so they backed off on that, but they thought initially we were trying to get in under the wire and illegitimately, which we would never do. And they said, we're so sorry, but there was a mistake. You can't be here. We exhausted all of our ability to be able to stay, and we finally acquiesced and said, okay, I guess that's all we can do. So, right before we left, you got to hear this, right before we left, a young woman by the name of Aurora Ellison. And if you're watching, Aurora, I love you. Aurora was, and as far as I know, is a firebrand for the Lord. And she was livid. She's like, this is not right. We were all livid because we knew it was not, you know, maybe it was slipped under the constitutional wire back in the 50s, but it was not okay, you know, in our time. And so we had a number of dreams about it and different things or whatever, but Aurora finally had the inspiration to write to, I believe it was, let me try to get this. She had read something online about something that, a precedent that had happened in the court system years ago in Washington, D.C., okay? Where someone else had faced something similar to what we were facing, and they won in court. So she was all excited one day and said, hey, look, guys, this has happened to somebody else, and they won. There's a precedent. I mean, I think they took it all the way to the Supreme Court. It was quite a deal. And so we decided at that point to write a letter to the churches. Now, we were not trying to make the city mad or be obnoxious. We probably were a time or two because we weren't perfect, but we decided to let the church know what was happening to this new ministry, the Salem House of Prayer, that so many of them were starting to get on board. And we wrote this letter, and it went kind of viral for that day. Churches all over the city. We started getting phone calls from pastors. How could they do this? And blah, blah. Everybody recognized the injustice of it, okay? And, the people who were in the leadership of the city, they inherited that ordinance. They weren't trying to be against us. I mean, we had to fight that feeling that maybe they didn't like us and all that. But I don't think that was really. There were some on the city council that didn't want us there for sure. They were anti-Christian for sure. I won't go there. But about half of the city council was not in favor of anything, especially a house of prayer. Anyway, we got lots of response, and the city started getting phone calls and emails, and we're in conversation with the city saying, is there anything we can do? And one of the things that we found out, someone suggested, they said, hey, wait a minute. Don't some of the churches in Salem have their office space downtown? Even though their church is somewhere else in the city, they have office space. And we went, by golly, they do. So we contacted the city and said, hey guys, okay, we're going to be leaving the building. We're leaving the building, but don't you guys allow churches to have office space downtown? And they said, you know what? You're right. And this is all documented, okay? This is by email. You're right. And so, yes, you can have an office space there, but you can't have they would call it a church. You can't have your church there. And I said, okay, so what you're telling me is that we can come to the building to do office work, but we can't come to the building to worship and pray and do what we do. And he said, that's exactly right. And then he asked me, would you like that in writing? And I said, sir, I absolutely would like that in writing. So I've got that document that says you can come in to do office work, but you can't come in to worship and pray and hold a meeting, which, we're planning on doing 24/7. As crazy as that sounds, that's what happened. We literally put up caution tape, because you had to walk. When you get out of the elevator, you had to walk all the way through this long, long space to get to the back part of the building where the office buildings were. So you had to walk past the sanctuary, the prayer room. It was a big, probably seated 100, 120 people. I felt inspired. I did this. I'll take responsibility for this. I got some caution tape because I wanted, when people walked through that prayer room, I wanted them to be reminded of how silly this was, but also of who we were, and that we were not going to give up on this fight of being downtown because God told us you're supposed to be down there. So I put up this caution tape, okay, pictures of it are in the book. And so every day when we walked past, we'd walk past the prayer room and send up a prayer or Shandai, speaking in tongues, you know what I'm saying. So we broke the law. We broke the law, the prayer law. So at that time, our good friends at Life Church, Don and Ann Finley, thank you, Don and Ann, if you're watching, I love you, said, you know what, we want to help out. You can have your prayer room, which is going about 8 hours a day. We weren't doing 24/7, we're doing about 8 hours a day. So you can have your prayer room we have an upper room in the church that we use for prayer. You can come and set up your Salem Mass prayer, your prayer room part of what you do, because they knew what we were doing in that space, and come in and pray. So we did for 9 months. Birthing time, gestation period. For 9 months, here's what we do. We'd get up in the morning. We would drive to Life Church. And we'd spend the first 4 hours, because remember, we're committed to 8 hours a day, the first 4 hours a day in the prayer room praying. And we had our little PA, and we're doing night and day prayer. We actually sowed into night and day prayer at Life Church. And I believe that God has benefited them for that, because they were gracious to us. And then we would get in our cars when the 4 hours was done, and we would drive across the bridge over the river, okay, because Life Church is in West Salem. And we'd drive downtown, and we'd go into that building. We'd walk past the caution tape into the office, and we'd do our administrative work. This went on for 9 months. The long and the short of it is, I got to cut this part short, is the city eventually conceded. Part of the reason they conceded is because we wound up sending that document to them about the precedent in the courtroom that had happened in D.C. In other words, their attorney looked at that and said, we won't win this fight. Eventually, we're going to lose this fight. Okay, that was part of it. I got a phone call from the DOJ. Okay, you can't make this stuff up. The miracles that happen are astounding. And the important thing about these miracles, guys, is not only for me to be able to just have a record of them, but also so that we know God is the one that said, "Thus saith me, Salem will have a house of prayer." He's the one that did it. He's the one that fought for it. He's the one that gave the ideas. He's the one that moved the hearts of the leaders, the kings, like the channel of a river. It's him that did it, because that's what he does. Anyway, so we finally got the email. We went to a few city council meetings and so on and so on. We finally got the email. They took it to vote. Okay. And unanimously, even the guys that were against it, changed their mind to remove the ordinance from the books, to strike it down and open the door for churches to be back in the downtown core of Salem, Oregon. God, it was a David and Goliath thing, and God won that battle. So at the end of 9 months, we moved back into the building, said thank you to Life Church, and it was shortly after that that the Lord spoke to us about doing 24-hour prayer. We had told the Lord we don't want to start 24-hour prayer and stop. We don't want a false start. We'll wait as long as we have to take to be in a position to be able to do it. That time frame, I think, took about 4 years before we were able to launch 24-hour prayer. Okay? And so the Lord spoke to us one day very clearly. Now, we had been watching IHOP by now on the internet, and people were coming and going and praying. We had a little tiny coffee shop that was going. We have a really nice coffee shop now that the folks from Life Church are running. But we, from almost the very beginning, had a little coffee shop, at least when we were downtown, that was, like a little coffee cart. My daughter, Deborah, if you're watching, I love you. Daughter, Deborah, and we called it Cherub Coffee Company. And people would sit there at that little, it's like a little kiosk like you see in the mall, and sold coffee to help them. We had a little bookstore with a lot of used books and some new books to try to just make money. And people would stop by from other parts of the country, and it was really great. So, 24-hour prayer. That has always been a primary goal. I know a lot of people tend to minimize that. It's not really that important. If God wants it, it'll happen. That I never felt that way. No different than IHOP or anyone else has done. You know what? Our vision is not just to pray, and because most of the ones that I've seen start out with a bang and they get less and less and less and less and less, and we guarded against that, to where they finally went down to one prayer meeting a week. Now it's one thing to start there and build up. It's another thing to have that and then to diminish down to where you've got that one prayer meeting a week, and then eventually that one goes away. And we said we're not going to do that. So it took us 4 years. And then eventually the Lord said, it's time. And spoke very clearly to us and said, here's the day I want you to start 24-hour prayer on 8/8/08. 8/8/08. I want you to start the house of prayer. Okay. So I said I was going to do this, but I cannot argue with the Holy Spirit. And so I'm going to end now, and I'm going to do another one. I'm just going to keep doing this until we're done, because I feel like I'm supposed to elaborate on some things and not so much on others. And I'm sure probably these will get less and less viewed as we go on. I do want to reiterate that our story in the book, The Prophetic History of the House of Prayer, pretty much goes up to about the time that we got into our final building, the building we're in right now, which used to be a bar and a place where human trafficking happened and so on. So I'm still coming up to that. Actually, let me finish the 24-hour part, and then that'll be my last one. So we'd heard the word of the Lord, 24-hour day prayer, 8/8/08. And the strategy that the Lord gave us, he says, I want you to do prayer meetings with the church all around the city. And we called it the launch, like launching a 5, 4, 3, the countdown to the launch, rocket ship and all that. We made posters with rockets. We called it the launch. And Jake and Jake was there all the time with me now. And Jake, if you're watching, I love you, buddy. But probably the house of prayer would not have existed had he not been by my side helping me either. So Jake, my wife, you know, Steve and Jen, different people that really, and many more too, and I can't name all their names. My niece Angela, yeah, a lot of people that were there in the beginning that eventually had to move on to other things. So I'm going to turn my fan on because I am just sweating here. So we decided to do this thing called the launch, and we would go to different places all around the city over the period of about 6 months, because that's how much time we had until 808. And we would do these prayer meetings. They were not very well attended. And, you know, there's still most of the people in the city were not really fully on board with this vision. A lot of them are now. Back then, it was a new thing. Everybody thought we were some kind of a weird, you know, people accused of being a cult, you know, it's just crazy stuff. We just kept saying, no, we're not. And we'd meet with them and they'd say, what do you guys actually really do? We'd say, we actually really pray. You know, and they couldn't wrap their mind around it. Anyway, so we did these prayer meetings, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We set up a day at the Carousel Park, very close, within 100 feet of the spot where I had stood in front of that acid ball that had been turned into a globe of the world and heard the Lord say, start the Salem House of Prayer. We said, okay, there was a little area there where you could, you know, like a little stage, I forget what they call those, like a little outdoor auditorium thing. And we said, here's where we're going to do it. We're going to do it publicly first, and then we're going to do it back in the prayer room. So we overlapped them on 8808. We called people from all over the state, and we said, come, help us launch 24. We've been doing the House of Prayer for 4 years. Help us launch 24-hour prayer with a big bang. And so they all came. We had a bus out there with our name on it. We had sign-up posters. It was, I think it's still online. I think you can still find it on our website. Anyway, so we set up the teams. We got everybody listed out, and then we had some teams come there. And so the meeting that we did started, I think, at like 6:30, 7, something like that. And we had a bunch of different ministers stand up and declare, you know, how important this was, and God's going to bless the city of Salem, our capital city, and the state of Oregon. And so we did that, and at 8 o'clock, we actually didn't start one prayer meeting, but 2. And we did this because it was a symbol to us that there was not going to be any overlap. Okay, when it got hard and nobody was there, we were going to pray anyway. And so at 8 o'clock on 8808 in the city park, a group of us got up and started doing a 2-hour worship and prayer set. Back in our building, a number of blocks away downtown, in the building that we had won the right to be in, at the same time at 8 o'clock, there was another team that was starting a set. I wanted to be at that one there, and I wanted to be at both of them. Yeah, I can't remember who started. It was probably Nels Olson, who was also one of the guys that really helped us establish the House of Prayer, and I love you, Nels. So many people to be thankful for. If your name doesn't get mentioned, we love you anyway. Anyway, so that launched us into 24-hour prayer. We did that for 4 years. We did that right next door to a bar that was spewing wickedness and darkness and demonic influence into the city. We had a fountain of light and a fountain of darkness right next to each other. And about the 3rd year of doing 9-day prayer, and when I say I'm talking about a live human being on the stage, I always say 2 o'clock Thursday. I don't know why, but 2 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, maybe because that's the least likely time, somebody would be up there. And we did that without a break. On Christmas, on Thanksgiving, we did 24-hour live worship and prayer. It wasn't just an open building. Somebody was up there. And you said, was that hard? Yes, it was extremely hard. It was harder for some people than it was for others. It was hard, but it was worth it. I do not regret one moment of doing that. Okay? So, that brings us to the conclusion, and I've got one more. I keep saying it's going to be the last one. I hope it's, yeah. I'm going to do one more. because the story of the building we're in now is significant, and at least as significant as all the other miracles that happened. So, all right, God bless you. I'm going to do the same thing I just did before. I am going to sign off, and then I'm going to set up program number 5, and I'm going to come right back on within, Lord willing, about 5 minutes, and I'm going to finish out this story. I do believe this will be the last time. Okay, we'll finish this story out and bring you up to present day, what the Lord has done, and the prophetic history of the Salem House of Prayer, which is my story, some of your story, definitely his story. Amen? All right. So if you can, join me again. If not, I understand if you want to watch it later. So God bless you guys. We'll be right back.